dawn in a European capital. A missile hits a block of flats. The blasts destroyed apartments across 3 floors. Firefighters rescued the injured. So far, miraculously, there are no reports of any deaths.
We managed to escape. We were in the kitchen. We were lucky. It was a direct hit into the living room. My wife and elder child have their legs broken open. The younger was taken somewhere by the rescuers. I am looking for him now.
Today, Ukraine's president posted this from the streets of the capital.
There is a lot of fake information on the internet now, saying that I am calling for our army to lay down its arms and that an evacuation is underway. Well, I'm here. We will not lay down any weapons. We will defend our state because our weapon is our truth.
And still the missiles come. Here, a residential building in the centre of Kyiv. It's not clear if there were any casualties. President Putin hoping that attacking Ukraine will encourage Ukrainians to overthrow their own government.
I appeal to the servicemen of the armed forces of Ukraine. Do not let neo-Nazis and Ukrainian ultra-nationalists use your children, wives and the elderly as human shields. Take power into your own hands.
This country is under attack from 3 points of the compass. The Russians aren't advancing as fast as many thought they would, but the Ukrainian military remains outnumbered. In the central Ukrainian city of Dnipro, many have started to consider what until recently seemed unthinkable.
I don't want to lose my country. I love it so much, you can't even imagine that.
It is quite shocking for me, and right now I'm thinking about taking weapon to my hands, at least to defend my local districts.
Others have not stayed to find out. Tens of thousands here crossing into Poland in the west, and on Ukraine's southern border into Romania too. Kyiv's civilians now direct targets in their own homes. Ukrainian forces are stalling the Russian advance. The fear must be that in an effort to break their resistance, President Putin may order a yet more brutal assault. Angus Crawford, BBC News.
And let's go now to our chief international correspondent, Lise Doucet, in Kyiv. And Lise, as we saw in the headlines, the security situation is such that you and many others throughout the capital are having to take shelter in basements. What's the latest you're hearing about the situation above ground?
Yes, the air raid sirens are sounding at regular intervals now, with a stern warning that civilians, residents of the city should take shelter. It's not an idle warning. There are reports now of fighting on the edges of the city. The main highway running east-west was a war zone last night as Russian forces have tried to advance. There's been missile attacks in the early hours of the morning against the southwest of the city, rather. We've been reporting about this residential complex, this long tower block, which was hit despite President Putin's promise that civilians would not be targeted, just military infrastructure. But as always in these wars, it's not just about the troops in the trenches, it's about the lives being shattered of people. And just like we've had to take refuge in a basement, right across the city of some 2.8 million people, people are taking to the metro stations, taking to safe shelters, going underground in kindergarten, schools, and their own homes. We met so many families yesterday when we went out. Some were trying to leave the city. Some were sending their elderly relatives away to somewhere safer. Everyone trying to find somewhere to hide. But in the midst of this, too, there is defiance of so many Ukrainians signing up to fight. There's an office very close to this basement where people have been getting guns, signing up even at this hour to fight for their future, for their family's future, and indeed for the very existential future of their own country.
And Lise, that was a tone struck also by President Zelensky, wasn't it, in his latest message a short while ago? He said we will overcome, and he seemed defiant, but he also seemed pragmatic, I guess, in that appeal for help, saying anyone who wants to come and fight to help us defend ourselves, we will arm you. And a recognition from him, I guess, in that statement of what a tough job they have on their hands to stave off the Russian forces.
And these we call them asymmetric warfare, where one side seems hopelessly outnumbered, outgunned by the other. For Ukrainians, and we've heard it from President Zelensky, we heard it from Vitaly Klitschko, the mayor, who's a champion boxer in another life, basically this morning taking to the streets and saying, we are still here, we survived the night, and Russian forces are not in the center of the city. Just surviving is seen as a success. But of course, this is just the beginning of what could be a very long, drawn-out battle. And President Zelensky, former comedian, as many people like to mention, but now he's a wartime president. And I know from being here for many weeks that hardly a day goes by, and sometimes twice a day, he addresses the Ukrainian people directly in one very emotional speech. Before the invasion began, in fact, hours before, he appealed directly to the Russian people. He switches from Ukrainian language to speak to his people, then switches to Russian to speak directly to the Russian people, urging them not to wage in war against their neighboring. There's so many deep personal historical connections between the Ukrainian people and the Russian people, not in that same way that President Putin has said that the country should not exist because it's an inexorable part of Russia itself. But yes, he has used these messages calling on citizens to remain calm. That has been his mantra for many weeks now, and he's still saying that at the same time as his defense ministry is urging people to sign up, no combat experience necessary. Any man now between the ages of 18 to 60 could be called up, but there's so many volunteers. People also being told yesterday to prepare Molotov cocktails to take on the invading forces. So this is not just army to army, it is very much the army against the people as well.
And it's interesting, just reflecting on what you're saying, Lise, about the juxtaposition, I guess, between what's happening on the ground and what's happening beyond Ukraine's borders, because clearly other countries are lending their support to Ukraine, whether it's citizens protesting on the ground, whether it's sanctions at governmental level, whether it's sporting bodies, business organizations condemning the invasion by Russia of Ukraine. But when it comes to what is happening on the ground, albeit other countries have sent in arms and so forth, the Ukrainians really are doing this themselves, aren't they? The fight is with them alone.
It's quite an extraordinary moment of history. It's a moment where we are reminded hour after hour, day in, day out, it matters. It matters most of all to the people of this country now under attack. It matters to the neighboring countries, including those of the NATO alliance, who have now invoked Article 4, asking for more protection because now they too feel threatened. It matters in London, where, as you say, it's not just the soldiers and military leaders, it's diplomats, it's sportsmen, it's filmmakers, it's artists. It's really a profound realization is sinking in. Yes, this is about Ukraine, but it is about all of us. It is about territorial integrity. It's about sovereignty. It's about people being allowed to determine their own future. This is a war which is shooting right round the world, which is why you are now broadcasting. We're all broadcasting from capitals around the world because everyone wants to have a say. Everyone feels affected in some way. But when you get down to the actual conflict on the ground, it is the Ukrainian people and armed forces against the might of the Russian army and navy and air force.
Lise, thank you very much. Lise Doucette, our chief international correspondent. Do stay safe, Lise. Well, our